My name is Tony Landolt with the Pool and Spa House. I oversee all four of our stores. And this is, again, a service, if you will, that we do every year, both at pool opening time and pool closing time. Tonight will be a lot of great information. A lot of information has kind of been tried and true over the years that will be somewhat of a repeat. There'll be a few little new nuggets as well. Um, the the time will go about, I don't know, 45, 50 minutes maybe. But again, it'll be a time that will fill up with questions that you might have and just make sure that you get all the information that you're looking for. We will also post this on our YouTube page. Should you miss any details and kind of revisit that, you'll be able to go back to our YouTube page probably by the end of the week and just subscribe to that. And that will be there as well. Tonight, giving our presentation is Randy Darby. He is our BioGuard representative, and he's been serving us, the Pool and Spa House, for many, many years. And we've been doing now these webinars for a couple years now. We do look forward to getting back into the classroom, the live classroom. We typically do this in the showrooms at our different stores. So hopefully we'll get back to that in the spring, fingers crossed. But Randy Darby, yeah, just an outstanding help. He's been a partner in the business for ages, and we just look forward to this
Yes, yeah.
opportunity to connect with you, the customer. So Randy, I'm going to give the rest of the time to you.
Sounds good, Tony. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And depending on how many questions, I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet, probably 30 minutes, depending on questions. And like Tony said, we do this a couple times a year to help people put their swimming pools to bed for the winter and then to open them up in the spring. I'm not a chemist, so I'm not going to be breaking down molecular structures and things like that. We're going to talk about winterizing tonight, and really kind of the three main objectives is to make sure that when you open up your pool next spring, whether it's an in-ground pool, above ground pool, it doesn't matter. We want to make sure that the water is basically clear. There's no bacteria, no algae growth. Maybe you have a little bit of residue on the bottom of the pool, but that's about it. So we'll talk about how to kind of treat the water, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to protect the pool surfaces and the equipment from freeze damage. Every couple of years we get a pretty hard freeze, and so we want to make sure that we protect the equipment, skimmers, pumps, filters, heaters if you have one. We want to make sure that we don't have any freeze damage from freezing weather. So that's really our whole goal tonight. And like Tony said, if you got a question, ask it in the chat box. This is really what we want to avoid next spring. And it's kind of funny. There's a lot of pool owners that just think they have to have the swamp cleaning party every May. And we really don't. With a little bit of preventative maintenance, we can prevent this from happening. So that's really what I'm going to cover tonight. And kind of the first thing is we don't want to close the pool too soon. And actually our timing is probably pretty good for this webinar. Is what we're looking for is the water temperature. We want ideally the water temperature below 65 degrees. And we are getting a little bit of background noise. If you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute, that would help. And then at the end, if you have any questions, we can take yourself off mute and ask. But we want to wait till the water temperature gets below 65 degrees. The reason for that is the winterizing products that we're going to put in last a lot longer when the water is cold. And it's also good to note that in the spring, we kind of use this as the temperature of ideally when to open your pool. When the water temperature gets above 65 degrees, even though you're probably not ready to swim at 65 degrees, maybe you've got some kids that might jump in at 65, but we want to keep an eye on the pool in the spring because as the water warms up, the faster the chlorine dissipates, pH can fluctuate. So we kind of use that as the time to open up the pool in the spring. But tonight we're talking about winterizing. So your water temperature I'm guessing should be 65 degrees or lower. And this is about the right time that we typically recommend winterizing the pool, sometime the first to middle part of October. We also don't want to cover up any problems. If you've got a green pool now, or if the water's cloudy, we want to take care of that now because it will be more difficult to clear up next spring if we wait. So once we've hit the water temperature below 65 degrees and you're ready to start winterizing, really the first step is to get the water in balance. And we ideally recommend bring a water sample into one of the 4 pool and spa house stores. And we're going to help you get the water perfectly balanced, because this is pretty important. If you think about it, that water is going to be sitting in the pool for, maybe 6-7 months without a lot of attention. If the water isn't in proper balance, it can cause some damage to the pool surfaces, plumbing, and equipment. So we'll take care of the pH, just like hopefully you've been doing all summer. We want to get the pH in proper balance, the total alkalinity, calcium hardness. If any of you use Optimizer in the pool as a water enhancer, we want to get that level in the proper range. Correct any existing problems, again, cloudy water, algae, those types of things. Maybe if you've got some dissolved metals in the water that might be causing some staining, we would want to take care of that before we close the pool down as well. So again, we want to get the water in tip-top shape, proper water balance. And if you haven't taken advantage of this before, the computerized water testing that they do at the pool and spa house is totally complimentary. They'll give you basically a recipe card of exactly what you need to do, step-by-step process of getting your water in proper balance for the winter. So after we've got the water in balance, then probably the least fun part of winterizing a pool is really the cleaning part. And what we talk about here is skimming the surface. If you've got any debris on the surface of the water, we want to brush the pool real well. Get your trusty nylon brush out, brush the walls, the bottom of the pool. The idea behind that is if there's any maybe algae, biofilms growing on the walls, that we can get that out into the water where the filter can remove it, the chemicals can remove it. We want to vacuum the pool. Again, basically, we want to get this water as clean as possible because we want the winterizing chemicals that we're going to put in to last as long as possible. And the things that affect how long the winterizing chemicals last is really how clean the pool is, how well balanced it is, the water temperature, those types of things. Because again, we want these products to last as long as possible. The other couple of things that we want to do from a cleaning standpoint is this is the best time of year to chemically clean your filter. Whether you have a cartridge filter, a sand filter, a diatomaceous earth filter, this is the time of year. All the debris that's gotten into the filter, especially the hard to remove debris like greases and oils, we want to get those cleaned out so they don't harden over the winter. Typically in the Pacific Northwest, the primary filter cleaner that we'll use is called Strip Quick. This works in all types of filters, cartridge filters, sand filters, diatomaceous earth filters. It's basically, it will shampoo the sand, shampoo the cartridge filter, so it'll work a lot better next spring. Also, if you get a little bit of a water line buildup, kind of a ring around the pool, there's cleaners like Off the Wall. It's kind of the same principle as cleaning your filter. If you've got debris on the filter, on the water line, that can harden over the winter and be very difficult to remove next spring. So we want to get that off the wall. Thus the name of the product. And this is kind of a thick liquid that you put on a sponge, scrub brush. It's compatible with the water chemistry, whether you have a tile surface, a vinyl, fiberglass, it doesn't matter. It'll work on all surfaces to remove the water line buildup. And if any of you use Soft Swim, which is a non-chlorine sanitizing system, we'd use a little bit different filter cleaner. It's called Soft Swim Filter Cleaner. So get the filter clean, take care of all the housekeeping chores. Again, we want to get that water as clean as possible before we move on to the next step. One side note, any of you that have a saltwater pool, saltwater pools use an electronic device that uses basically a cell that creates chlorine in the pool. Those need to be cleaned once a year. So we've got cell cleaners to clean those cells. So this is a good time of year to chemically clean your saltwater cell if you happen to have one of those. All right. So we've taken care of all the housekeeping chores. We've got the water properly balanced, and now you're really ready to add the winterizing chemicals that are going to prevent the pool from, turning into the green monster over the winter. And it's pretty simple. We've got what's called a 24,000 gallon Arctic Blue Winter Kit, and what the Winter Kit 24 stands for is 24,000 gallons of water. So if you don't know how many gallons of water you have in your pool, Tony and his staff at the store can calculate that for you. They just need to know a few things: the shape of your pool, the length of your pool, the width of the pool, the shallow end depth. If you have a deep end, the deep end depth, and they can calculate the gallonage. And the winter kit is designed up to 24,000 gallons. So if you've got a 18,000 gallon pool, we will put the whole kit in. There's some coupons in the kit, as well as a guide on how to winterize the pool, kind of like what we're going through tonight. And here's what's in the kit. Pretty simple. The first product that we're going to put in is called Arctic Blue Shock. This is a 2-pound container that'll treat up to 12,000 gallons. The kit has 2 of these in it. And this will establish a fairly high level of chlorine. It'll oxidize the water, burn out contaminants, clarify the water. It's very fast dissolving. You pour it into the pool, let it circulate for a couple of hours, and then we move on to the next step. So what we're trying to do here is we want to oxidize any contaminants that are in the water and establish a chlorine level somewhere around 8 to 12 parts per million of chlorine. So we're basically, normally, if any of you remember from the summer, we typically want to have 1 to 3 parts per million of chlorine in the water. But when we winterize the pool, we want to elevate that level because we need it to stay in the water for a number of months. That's why we're establishing somewhere around 8 to 12 parts per million of chlorine in the water. And that's what the Arctic Blue Shock will do. So again, 1 bottle per 12,000 gallons of water. And then the second product that's in the kit is called Arctic Blue Algae Protector. This is a long-lasting preventative algicide. It's a quart bottle. 1 quart treats up to 24,000 gallons. Let's say if you had a 12,000 gallon pool, you just put half the bottle in, save the other half for, maybe in the spring or maybe next winter. It kind of depends. One of the questions that people quite often ask is, how long will these winterizing chemicals last that we're putting in? And there's a lot of factors. It really depends on, again, if you put the pool to bed when the water temperature was below 65 degrees, how clean the water is. Do you cover the pool? If you put a cover on your pool, the chemicals are going to last longer. It also depends on what kind of a winter we have. If we have a real mild winter, the products tend to deplete a little bit faster. If we have a harsher winter, where it's colder for a longer period of time throughout the winter, then we tend to get the product lasts longer. So it's kind of funny. We actually, from a chemistry standpoint, we'd prefer to have colder temperatures because the chemicals stay in the water longer. But so kind of the bottom line here is, if we start to get an early spring, maybe in February or March, bring us water sample into Tony and his team into one of the stores so that we can double check the chlorine level, the algicide levels, to make sure that we've got enough of these products to hold you until when you're ready to open up the pool. A lot of folks, plan to open up their pool close to Memorial Day. Typically, these products won't last that long, depending on what kind of a winter we have. So definitely bring a water sample into the store to make sure we've got enough of these products in the water in the spring. Again, the winter kits have a few different money-saving coupons in them. There are a couple of other products that we can use as well. This is called the Arctic Blue Floater, and this is for white plaster pools only. This gives a little bit of added protection. This is basically a disposable chlorine float. So this holds 3.5 pounds of chlorine tablets, and when you take the wrapper off of it, it's got a place to poke some holes in it. And this floats around in your pool all winter, puts a little bit more chlorine in all winter to make sure that we again, so the pool doesn't turn green. Just keeps a little trickle of chlorine going in. We can't use this in vinyl or fiberglass pools. It's a little bit too strong. It could bleach the liner, it could bleach the fiberglass, so it's white plaster pools only. And then really last but not least, this is called Pool Closing Complete. This is a product that we put in to protect the pool surfaces, the plumbing from corrosion, scale buildup, metal staining. This will also help minimize the chance of getting a waterline buildup over the winter. So this is kind of the last step. Put the winter kit in. If you've got a white plaster pool, put the winter floater in. And then last but not least, a bottle of pool Closing Complete to prevent the pool from causing any surface damage, corrosion, that type of thing. Tony, we have any questions out there yet?
Not yet.
Okay. So that's the water chemistry portion to prevent the pool from turning green if you use chlorine or have a saltwater pool. For those of you that maybe use soft swim, which is a non-chlorine system, pretty simple to winterize a soft swim pool. Pretty much we're going to add an initial dose of the soft swim A, which is the algicide, 1 quart per 25,000 gallons. Add the initial dose of soft swim C, which is the clarifier or shock treatment, and then top the soft swim bactericide level up to 50 parts per million. Add a dose of natural result to prevent waterline buildup over the winter, and you folks are done. Pretty simple. Still get the water balance, do the housekeeping chores, clean the filter. But if you're using soft swim, this is the winterizing process for soft swim. All right, I'm going to take a breather for a second. Any questions on the water chemistry portion before we move on to really the last portion, which is preventing freeze damage? As you can tell, the water chemistry portion is pretty simple. I guess the only thing I'll kind of highlight again is if you can, as soon as the air temperature starts to creep up in the spring, start to get some better weather, bring a water sample into the store so that we can make sure that you still have some chlorine and algicide left in the pool, so the pool doesn't go south on us. And kind of and if you want to test it yourself, we just never want the chlorine level down below 1 part per million. That's when the algae bacteria starts to grow, when the levels get below that. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions yet. So let's move on to really the last portion. And this is a pretty important portion because this helps protect the pool from freeze damage. We basically have 2 winter care options. Typically in Western Washington, Western Oregon, we pretty much do the first option for off-season pool care in mild climates where it may or may not freeze. In Eastern Oregon, we winterize a little bit differently, where we'll drain the water out of the equipment. In some cases, blow the lines out so there's no water in the plumbing lines. So they're pretty much the only place that there's any water is in the swimming pool itself. But typically, we don't typically need to do that in the Portland, Vancouver area. So what we need to be aware of in Western Oregon, Western Washington, is we want to make sure that anytime we get freezing temperatures, that the water is moving. That's kind of the bottom line, because if you think about it, if the pump isn't running and the water's not moving and we get freezing temperatures, the water in the skimmer, the water in the pump, the filter, it can freeze. When it freezes, it obviously expands and it could break pieces of equipment. That's the whole thing that we're trying to avoid. So a couple of options here. Some people actually run the pump 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's perfectly fine. Some folks will only run the pump when they see the weather report and the air temperature is going to be close to freezing. Then they turn the pump on. Again, we want to make sure that there's no water in the plumbing lines, or there's no water in the plumbing lines or equipment that's not moving. And people will quite often ask, do I need to run the pump? From a chemistry standpoint, you really don't need to run the pump. because you've already got proper water balance, you've added the winter kit. So from a chemistry standpoint, there's really no need to run the pump, except to prevent freeze damage. If you don't cover your pool, you probably would want to periodically run the pump to be able to vacuum, that type of thing. If you've got a mesh cover on your pool, you may want to run the pump periodically just to filter out any fine debris that gets through the mesh cover, that type of thing. But again, really the whole thing here is just to make sure that the pump is always running when we get freezing temperatures.
Randy, you got a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question looks like from Mark. Mark says, I just lowered below the water that is below the skimmer plate and drain the lines. My predecessor would drop to the jets, and I'm assuming he means the returns, then plug them. Do I need this? Does he need to plug the returns? And he says, I worry about water level dropping, causing the liner to pull it out of the wall. I lowered because the skimmer plate, sorry, I lowered below the skimmer plate and lose an additional 1 to 2 feet. Can I refill midwinter since my lines are dry and closed?
Yeah, so you definitely could. I don't know if you have a leak in the pool. We definitely, you're exactly right. You don't want to get the water level too low because the liner could pull out. And a lot, in fact, in the next few slides that I'm going to show, a lot of folks with above ground pools will drain the water down below the skimmer, and disconnect the skimmer line, put the equipment in the garage or protect it. So you definitely don't want to let that water level get too low. Tony, anything you want to add there? That's more maybe in your wheelhouse.
Well, you can do it different ways. Like if you have an in-ground pool and you have a main drain, regarding your comment earlier about, running the water if there's a potential for freezing. So even if you do have your water level dropped, you can still potentially draw from your main drain with your skimmers off and just circulate that way as well if there was any real, concern there. No, I mean, I think that about covers it. Certainly, the liner, and the other thing too is, this isn't Alaska, right? It's Oregon. So the chance of a real deep freeze, is probably very slim to none. So the concern about a deep freeze, I mean, your lines should be, and I don't know what the codes are, to be honest, because we don't build pools, but I know your lines are, several feet below the surface. So at the end of the day, it would take a real significant freeze to freeze the actual lines underground. So the main concern there really is the water building up in the skimmers, and expanding and cracking them, where water has access to. And I think you're going to kind of go more into that too, Randy, so I don't want to steal any thunder, but yeah, I think Mark's main concern here, looking at his comment, was just it's an in-ground pool and is mainly worried about the liner. So
Yeah. Yep, I definitely would be worried about that too. So you definitely want to keep that water level up closer to the skimmer. Move to my next slide here. So the other option is like the winterized pools in Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, where we know we're going to get freezing temperatures, where we may do a partial drain, kind of like Mark was saying, draining down below the skimmer, getting all the water out of the equipment. In some cases, like above ground pools, actually removing the equipment and putting them in the garage. Typically no interim maintenance involved, because basically in those cases we have just water in the pool, nowhere else. And so kind of like he was indicating in his chat, is we'll drop the water level. In some cases, some in-ground pool builders do recommend dropping below the return lines, blowing the lines, plugging the lines, and then filling the pool back up. If you've got an in-ground pool, especially if you've got a newer in-ground pool, I would definitely check with your pool builder and see what their recommendations are. Every pool builder is a little bit different. Some pool builders want you to keep the water level up to the normal water line. Some some builders want you to drop it. I definitely would check with your builder to make sure that you're, to keep your, if you've got a warranty, you want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind. So
Yeah, great point.
we'll drain the water from the plumbing line. So where you may use a shop vac, blow the lines. This is not my expertise. If you need a little bit of help on this, you might check with one of the associates in the store. But we just want to get the water out of the equipment in the plumbing lines. Here's a couple of, we also want to protect the skimmer. That top right-hand picture, that little blue device that's going in the skimmer, that's actually called a gizmo that screws down in the skimmer. And the idea behind that is this, again, you only use this if you're going to drain the water level down and, potentially water could still get in the skimmer. That device basically absorbs the expansion. So when the water freezes, instead of it expanding on the skimmer and breaking the skimmer, it is absorbed onto this gizmo, and so that the skimmer doesn't break. And in above ground pools, there's actually some skimmer plates that you can put over after you drop the water level down, there's a plate that you can put over the skimmer so that the water, as the water level comes up from rain or snow, it doesn't overflow out the skimmer. And again, if you're going to use this method, we want to drain all the water out of the equipment. So the filter, the pump, turn the gas off to the heater. We're basically just isolating the water in the pool. We really don't care if the water in the pool freezes. That's not really an issue. It's kind of like if you think about, water freezing in an ice tray. It doesn't break the ice tray when the water freezes. It's kind of the same thing in a swimming pool. The water freezes. It's not going to damage the walls of the pool, that type of thing. So that's the equipment protection. And then really the last thing is deciding whether you want to cover the pool or not. And so there's a number of different types of covers. The covers that are on this slide, these are solid covers. Obviously the one on the top right is an above ground pool, a winter cover for an above ground pool. The bottom picture is a solid cover on an in-ground pool that's held down by water tubes. So from a water chemistry standpoint, these are probably the best covers because they don't allow anything, not much getting through the cover. The downside is you get a pool on top of a pool, so you do need to keep that pumped off periodically with all the rain we get in the Northwest. But when you do install these types of solid covers, you want to make sure they're not too tight on the pool so that when it does rain or snow, it pulls the cover into the pool. And there are some cleaners that we can use to, if you do use a solar blanket during the summer, you do want to remove that in the fall. And there are some cover cleaners like Stowaway to protect the cover over the winter. And then when you take your winter cover off in the spring, we'd use that to clean it as well. The other type of cover that we can use is a safety mesh cover that you see here in this slide. So when we say mesh, this allows a little bit of fine debris through, and obviously rain. You can actually, especially if you got little kids around, these are great covers to, if you're worried about a small child falling into the pool, you can actually walk across these covers. So great, and they look a little bit nicer as well. If you do have a mesh cover, because it does allow a little bit of fine debris and obviously rain and snow water, you do want to check the chemistry periodically, especially the chlorine level. You may need to apply a mid-winter shock possibly. And then if you have an automatic cover, these are great covers as well. You do need to pump the water off periodically. We don't want too much water, putting pressure on the cover itself. So it's a good idea to have some type of a cover pump that you could pump the water off the winter cover or off the automatic cover as well. And then if any of you don't cover the pool, which is perfectly fine, just a little bit more maintenance involved, you would want to be able to vacuum the pool periodically, because if there's any debris that lays on the bottom of the pool all winter, that can leave some stains. And I would recommend checking the chlorine level and the pH level on a monthly basis. And you may need to add some additional product to keep the water up.
Randy, before you go
Yeah.
to the next slide here, Dave is asking a question. Are there videos showing how to plug the skimmer and also how to drain the water out of the lines? So I'm sure there are a lot of videos out there, Dave, showing this, but essentially, let me start with a second question perhaps first. So while I'm not a technician, I'm in the retail store helping on that front. Essentially what the service guys are doing, if they are to come out to your place, or what you certainly could do, once you drain the water out of your filter, and remember, presumably most all people, all their equipment is above the water level, right? And so at the end of the day, gravity is going to force water downward. So once you drain your water from the filter, from the heater, from the pump, then essentially what you're doing is you're basically sticking like a wet vac, for example, a blower of sort, through the front nose of the pump where the intake is, and you're just forcing water back out to the pool. Essentially, that's how you're blowing and clearing out the lines. The water is going to have to come up the skimmer a little bit, so you might get a little bit of a geyser effect depending on how strong your blower is. But essentially, once you get all the water out of the lines, then you use one of those gizmos that we have at the stores that Randy was talking about. That screws right into the skimmer, and that's basically plugging the skimmer, is using that gizmo piece. So I hope that adequately answers the question. I got another question here. Sophia is asking, excuse me one second while I catch up real quick. How do you drain the rainwater off the top of the non-mesh cover? So the solid covers, solid tarp style covers, and this is a point that I wanted to bring up too. So it's important that if you're using a solid tarp style heavy duty cover, that the cover has enough play. And when you buy a cover from us, you tell the dimension of your pool. Just for example, it's 24-foot round above ground pool. We'll sell you a 24-foot round above ground pool winter cover, but the reality is the actual size of the cover is actually bigger than that, because that's going to give enough space for you to allow that cover to sag down to rest on the water level. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to, I think Randy mentioned this earlier, you don't want to pull the covers taut, because ultimately the weight of the water, snow, and all that is ultimately going to pull the cover in. So it's important that it's sized appropriately, and we at the stores can help with that. But it's also, it's important that the water, that the cover is sagging down and resting on that water. And so ultimately, to drain the water off of that once it builds up, we do also sell cover pumps. We sell automatic cover pumps. At the moment, supply is really kind of a challenge in terms of some of these really simple manual pumps, but we do have a pretty good stock of the automatic sensing, water level sensing pumps, cover pumps that just rest right on the cover, which is ultimately resting right on the water. It's plugged in, and so whenever that water level rises, it automatically pumps it off, and you just connect a garden hose type of a hose to it and direct it wherever you want. So great questions. One other point too I was going to make about equipment. Make sure, even if you don't quote unquote winterize your pool equipment and pool, with regards to gas heaters, don't turn it on even if there's a threat of freezing. Just make sure, as Randy pointed out earlier, just make sure the water is moving. Don't turn on your heater, because that will build up condensation and create other damage and stuff that you don't want to incur. So again, heaters, keep them off, just allow water to circulate. A couple other more questions here. Mark is asking, do you sell drain hose connectors to drain a sand filter instead of just draining onto your pump house floor? You know, Mark, that's a great question. Someone was actually asking me that question in the store, I think yesterday, or perhaps today, because there's so little room. Yeah, it was yesterday, and this particular customer, even his drain spout was actually faced toward a wall. The way they installed the filter, it wasn't even easily accessible. So he was hoping that we sold some sort of an angle fitting or whatnot, but no, unfortunately, um, and brands are different too. So I would, there might be some remedies for that, but we need to kind of take a look at what brand you have. I would just suggest perhaps that you can connect with your local store, whatever's closest to you. Um, some brands have weird dimensional caps and threads and all that. So yeah, that could be a challenge and I get what you're saying. That might be kind of a DIY sort of home remedy project to kind of come up with, perhaps. Good question, but nothing off the top of my head comes to mind. SJ says, have an above ground pool. Do I always have to bring the sand filter into the garage for winter, plus replace the sand actually? So, the filter itself that can stay outside, I do recommend if you can cover it. If you can kind of, shelter it somewhat, even with, some sort of a barbecue cover or something that at least will shed the moisture, that would be helpful. You definitely, with regards to the pump though, with above ground pools, a lot of people will have pool packs, right? So they have the sand filter and they'll have their pump sitting next to it. Bring in your pumps for sure if you can get them out of the moisture, get them into dry space. Um, for sure, your pump will last a lot longer if you can keep it out of the weather like that. The filter tank itself, not so much of an issue. By the way, some of those pumps are like screwed into those bases that come with those pool packs, so you'll have to unscrew it. But yes, for sure, try to get the pump out of the weather. The filter itself, just cover it if you can. The sand, and this is kind of more of a spring kind of a conversation, but the sand should be, or glass now, we're moving to a glass media, but every 5 years for residential pools. It's good for 5 years, but again, highlighting Randy's point earlier, make sure you're using that degreasing agent. Your sand will last longer and you have much less problems. Trust me, we deal with those every spring. Sand filters don't get shampooed, as Randy put it, and they're hard blocks of material and really have a hard time for getting water through it. So shampoo it, use the Strip Quick or Clean or other products there that are appropriate for your filter and your sanitizing types, but clean those for sure before you hibernate them. Good questions. Do we need to insulate and cover the pipes? And Randy, jump in if you have any other thoughts to any of these questions or any of my inputs.
Yeah, no, that was good, Tony. And I don't on the insulate and cover the pipes. I mean, as long as the water is moving, you really don't need to. But if you're not going to be able to circulate the water, then you would definitely want to make sure there's no water in the pipes at all. It kind of depends on if this is an above ground pool where the pipes are above the obviously on the deck or on the lawn. You definitely would want to make sure the water's moving. Tony, I don't think you'd need to insulate that, would you?
No, I mean, if it's in a pump house, there are people that will go to, safety extremes and they might put just like a heat lamp in their pump house, in their pump room, assuming it's, your equipment's enclosed. So just enough to keep, the ambient temp above freezing. At least for those people that have any concern at all about water left in the pipes. Again, it really just depends on to the extent that you winterize your equipment. If you're draining everything, there's really no need. It's really not going to, do you any good. But again, if there's water still in the lines and you're still keeping things, you're still maintaining the ability to circulate water, then again, just circulate water. And again, no need for the heat lamp. So I think that answers the question pretty well.
And as you can see on my slide, one last thought, again, don't close the pool too soon. Again, we're pretty much at the perfect time of year to close the pool. We've gotten, through September where we had some nice weather and the water temperature was still up there, but we're really good to go now to winterize the pool. And again, remember next spring, if we get an early spring, bring a water sample into the store or test the chlorine level yourself to make sure that we haven't let that chlorine level get below 1 part per million so that the pool stays nice and clear. And And that's really it. Tony, anything you wanna add?
No, great questions tonight. Thank you for everybody's input. Oh, here's one more quick question. Let's get Mark an answer here. I set the filter to backwash, pour cleaner, in water pod and let set for an hour, then run backwash. So yeah, Mark, so you're really talking about just that filter cleaning process at the pool and spa house, regardless of what store is closest to you. We'll have little one-page cheat sheets. The bottle does a good job. It's a little bit more fine print, but the back of the bottle, that is, does a great job of kind of explaining the process. But would encourage you to get a hold of, and this is something we can even email to you as well, but get a hold of one of those cheat sheets. But I guess in quick response there, pump off, sand filter and backwash, pour the appropriate amount of cleaner per the width or diameter of your filter. And there's a chart on the back of the Strip Quick bottle that will speak to that. Pour that into the hair and lint pot there at your pump. Close the lid. Turn the pump on just for a few seconds while the filter's in backwash. Just a few seconds is enough to shove that from the bottom now, reversing the polarity, if you will, from the bottom of the sand filter. We'll shove it up through the sand, up towards the top, and then you let it set, shut the pump off there, and then let it set it for a minimum of an hour. A few hours doesn't hurt. And then you finish the backwash process to get all the crud out. So yeah, that's a quick answer to that. So good question, Mark. Thank you. No, great questions. Thank you for everybody's involvement, and we appreciate your time out of your busy night to join us. Thank you.